Today marks the third anniversary since the US, the UK, and France have launched their tripartite aggression against Syria on the basis that the Syrian army has launched a chemical weapon attack on the city of Douma. Today we are in March 2021, and it is clear as the sunshine of the sun that this attack has never happened, and it was staged by the UK, France, US, Germany, and many other government-funded organizations called the White Helmets, in collaboration with Jaish al-Islam, which is an Islamist terrorist group in Syria that collaborated with the White Helmets to stage this attack in order to drag a foreign intervention or bombing of Syrian army posts. And that happened. Today I was going to my office, and on my way I was wondering, is there still an international community or international law? And this is a really important question. And my memory started to go back a little bit in history, at least to the history that I remember, starting from, for example, Yugoslavia, how the NATO countries launched an aggression on Yugoslavia, complete illegal aggression on Yugoslavia, outside the framework of the UN and the UN Security Council, and they were never held responsible for the destruction of Yugoslavia, for the partition of Yugoslavia, and for the deaths of the civilians and maybe the soldiers there. And nobody nowadays talks about that Yugoslavia issue, and the perpetrators of these aggressions, they were never held responsible for what they did. Then I also remember the war on Iraq, which was launched also on the basis of the so-called, or allegedly, that Iraq has a weapon of mass destruction and that Saddam Hussein is minutes away from launching a chemical and biological attack against neighboring countries or against American bases in the region. And today we are in 2021, and it is again still, it is clear as the sunshine of the sun that Iraq never had weapons of mass destruction. But they destroyed Iraq. They divided Iraq into sectarian and ethnic lines, although non-officially, but it is divided, and Iraq is unfortunately a failed state. And later they have launched another war of aggression, this time on Libya. Again, outside the framework of the UN, both in Iraq and in Libya. In Libya, they said that our intervention is only to protect the civilians and stop the warplanes of Gaddafi, who they claimed these warplanes are attacking the peaceful protesters. And today we are in March 2021. It is again clear as the sunshine of the sun that this has never happened. And the claims that Gaddafi was using black mercenaries to kill the protesters again has proven to be fake news. But at that time, even the Amnesty International was parroting and reporting about this fake news. Among other fake news, such as Gaddafi is giving or distributing Viagra to his soldiers in order to rape the female protesters, etc., etc. Something that also reminds me of the bombing campaign of Iraq in 1990-1991, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, and back then, again, Amnesty International claimed that the Iraqi soldiers were throwing baby incubators from the hospitals, from the rooftops of the hospitals, which is again proven to be false, despite the fact that I completely condemn Saddam Hussein's war against or occupation of Kuwait. But again, this was fake news. In 2021, another war, regime change war, was launched on Syria, on the basis that Bashar al-Assad is killing his own people and that there are democratic revolutionary groups in Syria calling for democracy and human rights. And then they started to talk about chemical weapons and all sorts of unbelievably acts of aggression or crimes committed by Bashar al-Assad, that if you only read the reports written or the videos that have been made or the movies, documentaries, investigations, etc., you will think that if you are with Syria, then you are with the worst criminal ever in the 21st century. This is the impression that they give you. But in 2021, thanks to independent investigative journalists, thanks to whistleblowers, thanks to WikiLeaks, we know for sure that this war was well planned. And this war was waged by the US and its allies in the region in order, at the beginning, to change the regime. And when it failed, they wanted to keep Syria in a turmoil, as they are doing now, by imposing further sanctions and by depriving the Syrian people of basic needs, such as wheat, such as energy, fuel. And that is why the US is occupying Syria's oil and gas fields and burning the wheat of Syria. I'm talking to my friends in Syria, and I can assure you that the situation is worse than at any time during the past years because of these sanctions, because of the people are unable to secure their basic needs. And despite that, the foreign minister of the US or other imperialist powers, they have the audacity to come out and lie with a straight face to the people and say that, oh, we are here to help the Syrian people and these sanctions are only targeting the Syrian regime, something that I have debunked on Syriana Analysis many times. You can watch the previous videos and see how these sanctions are slowly killing the Syrian people. So all these questions that I started to ask myself and just remember all these incidents that happened in the past at least 2 decades. Do we still have an international community and do we still have an international law? When the Second World War ended, the big powers such as the United States, the UK, France, Russia, and China, in collaboration, of course, with other states, they have formed the UN and they have controlled the UN Security Council. They have a veto. The reason for that, or the theoretical reason for that, was that these countries are responsible to guarantee the peace, stability, and the international security. But it is quite obvious today in 2021 that at least 3 of these permanent states of the UN Security Council, namely the US, the UK, and France, have grossly violated international law, and they grossly caused instability and destruction of entire nations and the murder of millions around the world, starting from Vietnam, North Korea, and till Syria. Again, these countries have also invested heavily in international organizations, and they have tools and weapons of influence like the OPCW, for example. And all these questions also makes me wonder, how can we trust these countries again when they're talking about the pandemic and they are promoting for the, imagine that, we can't even name it now because YouTube will delete your channel. You're living in a dystopian world that you can't even criticize private corporations and factories that are manufacturing these experimental materials that they want to inject us with. So the only thing that comes to my mind that seriously there is a serious need of an international body that can create some sort of a balance, because all these crimes that have committed and caused mayhem around the world on the expense of our livelihood, our future, and our businesses and our friends and family who died during these wars. There is a big need for such a body that can balance this warmongering countries who can do anything they want and go unchecked and without any responsibility. That is why countries like Iran is investing in a nuclear program. That is why countries like North Korea have a nuclear arsenal. Why these countries are developing such programs or resorting to such programs? Because there is no more an international law or international community that can guarantee your safety and security. And what's the alternative? What's the alternative if you don't have such a program that you can deter such attacks against your country? This is a very serious situation that we are living nowadays, and the only thing that comes to my mind, there is a famous Arabic saying, if you are not a wolf, wolves will eat you. And this is the international community or the international jungle that we are living nowadays, with only one hope, that alternative powers could rise and create a balance of power with the imperialist powers who have caused so much pain. Not only me personally, because I'm also a victim of their wars, but to millions and millions and millions of people. Just imagine that. Just imagine for a second that you have to wait for 2 to 3 to 4 hours to buy one package of bread that can suffice you maybe for 2 days for you and your family. Just imagine that you have to wait 24 to 48 hours on a gas station to fill a little bit fuel for your car. I'm telling you these stories and urging you, just imagine that. I'm living now in Berlin. Just imagine if I have a car or a family that I have to waste all these hours to guarantee the basic needs of my family or for myself. It's unimaginable. You cannot imagine that because you're not living that. But it is happening now in 21st century, and still, if you just read the media, it's really ridiculous how they portray these wars and how they try to cover up the governments, and after that they ask why do we have a lack of trust for this media outlets while they're talking about now injecting us. How can I trust these guys? How can I trust someone like Tony Blair, who is a complicit in the death of 2 million Iraqis, while he is promoting for the passports of this? It's really crazy. I was just brainstorming and talking to myself, and I wanted to share my thoughts with you. And we'll see you in the next video. If you're new, please consider subscribing and all the stuff, like and share, etc. You know the thing. Yalla, see you next time.